Hey everybody, sorry it disconnected on its own again. But I was telling you about a woman who had open heart surgery, and when she woke up, she claimed to have seen God in a vision while she was in surgery. And God said, "You've got 30 more years to live." And so when she woke up, she said, "Man, I'm going to live it up. I got 30 more years." So she stayed in the hospital and had a complete makeover. She had a tummy tuck and liposuction and hair transplants and collagen injections. And when she walked out of that hospital, she was hit by an ambulance and killed. When she went to the pearly gates, she asked God, "Hey, I thought you told me I had 30 years left to live." And God said, "Yeah, I'm sorry, but when you walked out of the hospital, I didn't recognize you." There's nobody to laugh at the goofy preacher jokes. We need a laugh track or something. But here's the point. God doesn't promise us stuff like she claimed to have had that kind of promise. God makes promises, but we as Christians need to understand what God has promised and what God has not promised. And this poem will help remind us of that. Have you ever seen this poem? God hath not promised skies always blue, flower-strewn pathways all our lives through. God hath not promised sun without rain, joy without sorrow, peace without pain. But God hath promised strength for the day, rest for the labor, and light for the way, grace for the trials, help from above, unfailing sympathy, and undying love. God hadn't promised us we won't have problems. He's promised us that He will be there with us in the midst of our problems and give us the strength to survive if we'll lean on Him. Now let's look at James 1 verses 13 to 15 as they deal with a different kind of problem, and that is temptation. And these are actually enticements to sin. Chris, you're going to have to advance that for me. Here we're talking about a different kind of problem, and that's temptation to sin. Beginning at verse 13, "Let no one say when he is tempted, I'm being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and He Himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death." Will it advance, Chris? Sorry about that, everybody. Maybe he'll catch up to us in a minute. So James is telling us here that if you're feeling tempted, God is not the source of that temptation. God never gets tempted and never tempts anybody. And God has been blamed for our temptations ever since the beginning of time. When Adam partook of the forbidden fruit, he blamed the woman and he blamed God. God, that woman that you gave me, she gave me that fruit and I did eat. But it's not right to blame God or blame others for our temptations. Some people blame the devil. Satan was in the garden too, and he used the serpent to tempt Eve. But if Eve didn't want the fruit, there's nothing the devil could have done to tempt her. You see, the source of temptation is not in God. It's not even in the devil. The source of temptation is inside of us. And that's where we have to start to deal with it. There was once a farmer who had an old ornery mule that wouldn't move. And so the farmer hooked up a carrot on the end of a long stick and dangled it out in front of the mule's nose. And so then he would go to try to get the carrot. And so the source of the temptation is not in the farmer. It's not in the carrot. The source of the temptation is in the mule. If he didn't want the carrot, he wouldn't go. A mama fish told her babies to swim in a straight line behind me. But one little baby fish saw a worm and went and swallowed the worm, not knowing there was a hook in it. You see, the devil, he can bait us. He puts a hook in it, but he can't make us want it if we don't want it. The thing is, he appeals to the desires that we have within us. What we need to do is work on those desires. And we can't control bad thoughts from popping into our heads, but we don't have to dwell on them. We can direct our minds to think on more positive things. We can remove ourselves from a tempting situation and walk away from it. We don't have to give in to the temptation. We have to resist. And so there are rewards not only for overcoming trials, but also for overcoming our temptations. The rewards for overcoming include spiritual maturity. In verses 3 and 4, James says that if you withstand the trials of life, it will produce patience, endurance, and steadfastness. Verse 4 says that it will make you complete, lacking in nothing. And verse 12 says that if you withstand all these trials and endure all the way to the end, you're going to get a crown of life in heaven. The Olympic winners in James' day would receive a crown of leaves, and those leaves would wither very quickly. But the trophy that God's people get for enduring all of their problems is eternal life. And it'll never tarnish or fade or waste away. Eternal life in heaven is forever, where there will be no more problems. And so let's close by listing 3 ways to overcome. Whether it's trials, tests of faith, or whether it's temptations to sin, enticements to sin, we can overcome by doing 3 things. Number 1, James says, be optimistic about your struggle. Be optimistic about it. Have a positive attitude. Count it all joy. God is bigger than our problems. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 10:13, no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide a way of escape that you may be able to endure it. Be positive. God can help you overcome. And then number 2, whether it's problems, the trials of life, or tests of faith, or whether it is temptations or enticements to sin, pray for wisdom. We can overcome by praying for wisdom. Read with me beginning at verse 5, James 1 verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Ask for wisdom to make good choices, but ask confidently and with trust, and God will hear your prayer. There was a mama who invited ladies from her society club for brunch. And she was frantically trying to get everything ready for these elegant women. And finally, when it was time to sit down and enjoy the meal, she asked her little girl to lead the blessing for the food. And her daughter said, Mama, what do I say? And she said, just say what you've heard me say. And so the little girl bowed her head, and this is how she prayed in front of all those women. Oh Lord, why did I invite all these snobby ladies over? She was doing the best she knew.